All right, guys. Today, let's talk about Liu Che and Alex. Right. So on the screen here, you see 6 marches with the mid gear. That's actually my gear. This is just kind of showing where my commanders are at, the pair I ran, the gear, the armaments underneath it, and this group buff and debuff rating, and just like my personal opinion on how much benefit like the buff and debuffs to the group is benefiting the group. That doesn't necessarily show up on the report, right? So like for example, Boudica YSG, the only debuff or buff that they give to the group is Boudica, the target is taking 35% extra skill damage from the active skill, and then I think they get like some march speed reduction, right? It's like a 1.5. Like it could be worse, but it's pretty low on the totem pole. Whereas you have something like William, which is just phenomenal. William's support is honestly on par with Trajan, probably even better. We could break that down another time, so I would give that a 9, right? And then like a 10 would be like Trajan Mulan, where it's just pure support and almost no like one-on-one trading capability, right? So the reason why I got this idea was because we have a couple of different ways right now in which we want to test how good commanders are, right? So one, for example, whenever a new commander comes out, Chizgul goes to the ARC practice match, and they'll do one-on-one, different commander pairings, see how they do one-on-one. Sometimes they'll even do 5-on-5. They'll pick like the order they want to go, right? And like that valuable is not insignificant. It shows certain things, but there's also things that are missing, right? Because that doesn't show what it's like in a ball situation where you're not always just connected to the target. Maybe you'll make a contact, then you'll disengage. You'll contact, disengage, right? So like in that case, instant proc becomes a lot more valuable. Whereas when you're staying connected, then the active skill will always be able to fire. And then you have someone like Sargon who's like awesome at dueling, right? Or in practice matches when you're dueling, or even Canyon when you can stay connected. But on the field, a lot of people find them to be lacking, right? So kind of my quote unquote testing for this was I decided towards the end of fighting that I was going to bring 6 marches out at a time, and just a normal fight on the field, which usually is that back and forth. We have 2 groups going back and forth against each other. And then when I had 3 marches hit about 50%, I was going to pull all of them back. That way, they all went out at the same time. They were all in the field for about the same amount of time. And then when I bring them back, I could compare and see how the reports did, right? One, I didn't think about this until towards the end of fighting. So yesterday, Pass 5 open, not when Pass 5 opens initially. It's kind of after Kingsland has been settled. Pass 5 opens, and then the winning side usually invades the losing side. We were the losing side, so we got a little bit of skirmish there, right? But I excluded any of the reports where, because sometimes you're fighting someone, you could bait like another person to come out to the side. Usually they look at my KP, and like players with higher KP will want to take me to the side, and they think they could take me on, right? So you do like a 5-on-5, 6v6. That one, it's cool to look at the reports, but whoever gets targeted first, in this case, usually ZL and Herman, they're just going to trade really negative, right? And then whoever gets targeted last, especially if you win, they're going to trade really positive. So it's not that the reports are like they don't matter, but it doesn't necessarily show in a normal context when you're not doing that how these marches do. Okay, so a couple other things. So for most of this KVK, I actually ran Scipio Liu Che together, and then it was hard for me to find a good home for Guan, right? I started out with Guan Mehmed for maybe like half of the KVK, 5-2, 5-5, double relic Mehmed. On paper, it should do well because Mehmed brings health, right? He does skill damage boost. He also has a 5-target AoE, so you could get another double AoE out there. And that marches mid, right? One, it just doesn't move fast. It feels really, really slow. But two, even when it trades, when you feel like you should have a good trade, like the average should be like 4 or 5 to 1, it'll do like 3 to 1. And then when you think you do okay, and the Scipio Liu Che is doing like a 6 to 1 trade, Guan's barely trading positive, right? So it's not like it was terrible, but out of the 6 marches I ran this KVK, that was clearly the worst one. So about halfway through, I decided to try, hey, maybe I'm going to try Martel. The trades were about the same. So I ran Guan with Martel as a secondary. Then I tried Guan with Alex as a secondary, and the trades were still about the same. But at that time, I figured, hey, at least Alex has a lot more march speed, and he has a lot of that group buff, debuff utility. So if I run him, at least it'll be better. So I actually ran that for the rest of KVK until yesterday, right? So the group buff debuff rating is my opinion. I think I already said that. I think people argue different things, but it's very important to distinguish how, like, when you have all damage, right? If you boost your all damage, so if I boost Liu Che Alex's all damage, that's not as valuable as when you make the enemy take more all damage, right? Because if the enemy is taking, say, 30% more all damage, that means if one target is hitting, I mean, if one march is hitting him, he's taking 30% more damage, and that one march is benefiting. But if all 6 marches are targeting that enemy, all 6 marches benefit from that, right? And if you're 12x surrounding someone, then all 12 marches surrounding that enemy is benefiting. Whereas if I benefit the Liu Che's Alex march, at best, right, I could boost 30% all damage, and then Liu Che hits 5 targets. At best, it'll just spread to 5 targets. So Alex's debuff, making the enemy, 3 enemies actually, take 30% all damage for 4 seconds, is extremely good. And I think it's very, very underrated, just because people think Alex is kind of fading and getting old. And he is, and I thought he was, right? A couple of the videos I made before, I actually recommended not investing in him. And you can see in this one, I didn't even bother getting a relic for him just because I thought he was out the door, and that relic is just going to go to waste. Whereas like now, right, I can't run Mehmed with an archer. I can't run Mehmed with infantry because it's just too slow. And calves, it's actually easy to fill in calves by getting them through the dailies or like other avenues. So Mehmed is actually the first one out for someone that I thought I was going to use a lot longer, just because I thought he was a universally versatile secondary, but the lack of march speed is really making it difficult. So one thing about march speed, I think march speed doesn't actually show up when you do ARC practice matches, when you do the battle simulator, or even when you're switching a march out for another march in canon to see how it does, right? Because in most fighting, if you guys have done any fighting, you know this, right? There's a lot of back and forth. You'll stay connected, you'll disconnect, connect, and disconnect, right? When you do that, you're not just launching active skill after active skill. And when that's the case, instant proc actually becomes a lot more valuable, right? So Alex obviously has a instant proc, right? 1700 damage right away. It doesn't take like 2 or 3 seconds. It's just right away. And that actually becomes a lot more valuable in a real, like, live field fighting scenario. And then also Alex brings a lot of march speed, right? 30% plus a 20% from Liu Che, that's 50%. I can't remember off the top of my head the Scipio with the triggered, if it's more than 30%, but regardless, Alex Liu Che is either the fastest meta viable infantry march, or it's like a close second, right? Now, we hear content creators and people that seem to be experts talk about the importance of march speed. I'll just kind of like touch on this a little bit more, right? So one, march speed, when you get a bonus, it scales off of the base stats. So the base T5 cavalry march speed is 80. The base T5 infantry march speed is 65, right? So if I'm getting a 10% boost to the cav, I'm actually getting 8 points of extra march speed. Whereas like if I'm getting the same 10% for infantry, I'm only getting 6.5. So when you get a march speed bonus for a cav, it actually increases the march speed by even more compared to infantry, right? So Nevsky Joan off territory is the fastest cav march in the game. The T5 cav with full crystal tech, so all the swift marching maxed out, plus Nevsky Joan off territory. To be able to match that, the infantry equivalent, I actually need to gain 90% of march speed to match that, which obviously no infantry march could hit that, right? The reason why march speed is so important, because it actually plays a offensive and defensive role that doesn't necessarily show up on the reports in the same way that you would think about, because it doesn't actually, March speed doesn't show up offensively or defensively, right? But when you think about March speed, uh, if you fight on the field, right, you're always going to have to watch your positioning. And if you get out of position, it's going to take X amount of time for you to retreat back into a good position. Okay. So let's just say the cav march is retreating back 30% faster than the infantry march. Then theoretically, they're actually going to take 30 less percent damage than the infantry that takes longer to march back when that's out of position. Now, vice versa, if an enemy gets out of a position and you're trying to hit that enemy, if it takes you longer to actually reach him and hit him, you're leaving damage on the table, right? So march speed doesn't actually necessarily show up in the statistics as far as offense or defense, but there's actually an application for both. And when the march is really slow, one, you miss out on a lot of opportunities, but you almost have to be extra careful because you even get a little bit out of position, even if the march is really tanky. If people are targeting you and swarming you, or like 3, 4, 5x surrounding you, you're still gonna melt right away, right? So like march speed actually can provide defense and offense. Another thing to think about is skill damage reduction. So Alex isn't necessarily bringing this, but a lot of the damage you take on the field, if you play good position, is that you're taking passive AoE skill damage, right? So, for example, Nevsky statistically is way tankier than Liu Che and Alex combined, right? Just because Nevsky provides defense, provides health. I think Joan provides a little bit more health. There's just a lot more defensive stats on Nevsky. So if Nevsky gets out of position and people target him, he's going to melt a little bit slower, right? But if you're playing good position for both, right, and both are taking passive skill damage, then Liu Che's 20% skill damage taken reduction actually shows up a lot more. So yes, like it, ideally you just have more health and defense, right? But like skill damage taken reduction is really important because it also impacts how long you can stay on the field. So when you have high march speed like Alex and Liu Che, you have an instant proc that's way more applicable to what like real like open field fighting is like. And then there's that group utility. This March I think is actually very viable. Too bad I won't be able to really use it again until probably early April. And I'll actually be in 2268. So hopefully we'll be fighting on the Imperium Kingdoms. If that March is viable in Imperium Kingdoms, it's definitely viable in AC and on down, right? So I think right now, right, obviously the best pair for Liu Che is going to be Scipio and LC. Some other considerations right now you can have for that is Gorgo and Sargon, right? The challenge with Gorgo, who always trades well, I think out of all the pairs in the game right now, Gorgo Liu Che is the hardest pair to trade positive against. But it doesn't have, well, I won't say because LC brings like 20% march speed, but it's very low in march speed, right? And also it doesn't have a lot of that group utility. I think Gorgo, her expertise, when she reaches below 50%, then there's a chance that 5 targets could lose like X amount of attack for X seconds, right? But by the time you get below 50%, you're not usually on the field for that much longer. Your impact has already diminished drastically. And then also when you have so little march speed, it's one, it just takes forever, and it's actually kind of hard to use, right? And most of the time when I do see a Gorgo on the field, it's because someone's doing a city popping tactic on me, and like it's really hard to trade positive there. But I actually wonder how well Gorgo Liu Che does like more like open field fighting where you're going back and forth. Also, it's an MGE commander, it's hard to get. And then Sargon is, I don't want to say out of the picture because a lot of people still use Sargon, but I think it's pretty conclusive at this point that Sargon is not a good investment. He does a lot better in duels and like even in Canyon maybe, but when you're using him on the field, he just doesn't do that well. And then like he does, you know, like even when he's doing his alt effect and the target is taking more skill damage, as soon as you get to 10 stacks, which is 30% skill damage taken, it just like clears. So if I had to rank the pairing, I would say clearly Scipio Liu Che is the best pair. And if you had to do 2 infantry pairs, I think you would do Guan Scipio, and then Gorgo Liu Che. But I don't think Alex is as far off from Gorgo Liu Che as people would like to lead you to believe. Just because even though the Gorgo Liu Che might trade really well, the group utility and then how much harder it is to get her, I don't know if it's even that worth it. So beforehand, I actually thought I would maybe invest in Gorgo after I finished my Herman. And after kind of this discovery yesterday, where when you moved Liu Che as a primary, it does way better. I'm probably just going to skip Gorgo, save my gold heads after I expertise every one of these commanders on the screen, and wait for the next Cav commander to come out. Or unless it's some infantry commander that's a really good secondary. All right, so let's actually go to some reports. So these 4 reports were the only 4 I could pull that fit the scenario, right? So the scenario is I bring all 6 marches out at once. I didn't actually end up dueling someone. It was just kind of trading back and forth. When 3 of the marches get to about 50% health, I pull all of them back. So they were all in the field at about the same time. I look at the reports, right? So if you look at the reports here, and by the way, if you play good position, you're usually going to have positive reports, right? The times when I do have negative reports is when I'm not paying attention, I get out of position, or you just really need to run it down for something that's significant. But like for the skirmish yesterday, yes, I fight in a ball, I fight towards the front, but a lot of it is just playing position, and usually people will get out of position, you target them, you end up trading positive. So for this first one, I think I ended up trading about like a 3.5 to 1, right? The second one, it's almost a 6 to 1. I'm talking about KP, right? So KP gain versus KP you gave the opponent. I ran half T4, half T5 for this. That's why like the sub wounds might not necessarily add up to one I'm talking about. This next one was probably the best one, right? It was like 7 to 1. And this last one was about 3 to 1, a little bit less than 3 to 1. Overall, out of the 6 marches, and I'll actually cover this in a later video, maybe tomorrow or the day after, the net KP gain versus loss, when you combine the 4, surprisingly, the LC Alex actually did the best out of the 4, which I wasn't expecting. You can see on here, clearly the best gear I have is on my ZL Herman, and second best gear is probably actually this Guan Scipio, just because I have the ring and the horn on there. My armaments are all pretty good. These are all wedge besides the second one, which is arch, right? And they're all around 35% or more of stats when you count the inscriptions, right? I think if I had to just give like a quick summary, kind of the findings I found yesterday, and by findings, this is by no means like a definitive result, right? Because I'm literally only showing 4 reports, and then you just kind of have to take my word for it that the other reports were pretty similar. It just didn't occur to me to start saving the reports and making this video until towards the end. The biggest surprise yesterday for me was probably just like how viable even a 5411 Herman was behind ZL. And then the second biggest surprise, or probably even the biggest surprise, was finding out that when you flip it, when LC is a primary and Alex is a secondary, this march actually gets way better. So yeah, so if you're watching this and you're wondering if this march is viable, at least for A seed, where you still could fight like really good players, it's more than viable. If you want to wait 2 months, 2.5 months until I get to test this in more of an Imperium setting, I'm pretty confident that it'll still be viable, just because it actually traded surprisingly well. Okay. Next video I'm going to come out with, I'm actually going to kind of go over the reports for all 6 marches and give more like general meta thoughts. But this one is touching mostly focused on LC Alex with a little bit of focus on the other stuff. So if you got some value from this, please like and subscribe to the video. As always, I read every freaking comment in the YouTube section. So if you leave a comment and I think it can be productive, I respond. And some people are just toxic and I just kind of ignore it. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.